The apostles were ordinary men chosen by Jesus to carry out his extraordinary mission. They walked with him, witnessed his miracles, and were entrusted with spreading his message. However, their commitment to Christ came with immense cost. Most of them faced violent deaths, sealing their faith with their blood. Their stories are not only a reflection of their unwavering faith, but also a testimony to the lengths they were willing to go for the gospel. Today, we look deeper into the lives and deaths of each apostle, remembering how they died and understanding what their sacrifices mean for us today. 1. Saint Peter, crucified, upside down. Peter, the leader of the apostles, is one of the most famous figures in Christian history. After his preaching in Rome, Emperor Nero ordered his execution. Peter was crucified, but he requested to be hung upside down, claiming he was unworthy to die in the same way as his Lord. The crucifixion took place in the year 64 AD, during a period of intense persecution for Christians. The tradition of Peter's death, depicted by many ancient texts, shows his profound humility and devotion. He was not only crucified, but was forced to suffer in the most agonizing way. His upside-down crucifixion symbolizes the cost of his discipleship and his willingness to bear the burden of spreading Christ's message to the world. 2. Saint James the Greater, beheaded James, the son of Zebedee and brother of John, was the first apostle to be martyred. His death is recorded in the Acts of the Apostles. He was arrested by King Herod Agrippa I, who ordered his execution by the sword. James was beheaded around 44 AD. His martyrdom marked a pivotal moment in the early Christian movement as it sparked more intense persecution against the apostles. James' death was swift, but it was also a moment of great courage. Despite being one of the inner circle of Jesus' closest disciples, James remained steadfast in his faith, not renouncing the message of Christ. His death was a testament to his loyalty and devotion to Christ. 3. Saint John, natural death in exile. John, the beloved disciple, was the only apostle who died a natural death. However, his life was not free of suffering. He was exiled to the island of Patmos by Emperor Domitian around 90 AD, where he endured great hardship. It is during this exile that John wrote the book of Revelation. John's natural death stands in contrast to the violent martyrdoms of the other apostles, but it did not diminish his profound witness to Christ. He was faithful to the very end, preaching the gospel and writing about the eternal victory of Christ. His legacy, particularly the vision he recorded in Revelation, continues to inspire Christians to persevere through trials and to trust in God's ultimate victory. 4. Saint Andrew, crucified on an X-shaped cross. Andrew, the brother of Peter, was a passionate evangelist who traveled to many places spreading the gospel, including Greece, where he was eventually martyred. According to tradition, Andrew was crucified on an X-shaped cross, a form of crucifixion that was less common but still excruciatingly painful. He was bound to the cross with ropes so that his suffering would last longer. His death occurred in the city of Patras, and he preached from the cross for 2 days before he died. Andrew's crucifixion was marked by his bold proclamation of Christ, even in the face of death. The tradition that he was crucified in such a way symbolizes his rejection of worldly power and his total dedication to Christ, who had also been crucified for the sins of humanity. 5. Saint Philip, crucified. Philip was another of the apostles who suffered a violent death. He preached in many regions, including Asia Minor, and was eventually martyred in Hierapolis, modern-day Turkey. Some traditions suggest that Philip was first scourged before being crucified upside down, though the specifics of his execution vary. The pain of his crucifixion was compounded by the fact that he was subjected to intense public mockery before he was killed. Philip's martyrdom stands as an example of complete devotion. He faced his death with courage, knowing that his suffering would help spread the message of Christ to the world. His death by crucifixion reflects his unwavering commitment to the gospel even when faced with brutal persecution. 6th Saint Bartholomew, flayed alive and crucified Bartholomew, also known as Nathaniel, was an apostle who traveled widely to spread the gospel. He is believed to have been martyred in Armenia, where he faced a brutal execution. According to some accounts, Bartholomew was flayed alive. His skin was peeled off before he was crucified. In some traditions, it is suggested that he was also beheaded after being skinned. His martyrdom is considered one of the most gruesome and painful deaths in Christian history. Bartholomew's death reflects the extraordinary sacrifice he made in spreading the message of Christ. His willingness to endure such torturous suffering for the gospel challenges us to consider the depth of our own commitment to Christ and his mission. 7. Saint Matthew, martyred by the sword. Matthew, the tax collector turned evangelist, was one of the most influential apostles in the early church. He preached in regions as far as Ethiopia and Persia, and it is in Ethiopia where he was martyred. According to some traditions, he was stabbed to death with a sword while preaching the gospel. His death was a direct result of his boldness in spreading the message of Jesus. Matthew's death serves as a reminder that the call to follow Jesus is often not a call to comfort, but to sacrifice. His willingness to lay down his life for the gospel exemplifies the cost of discipleship. 8. Saint Thomas, speared to death. Thomas, often remembered for doubting the resurrection of Jesus, became a strong and unwavering witness to the truth of Christ. After preaching in India, Thomas was martyred by being pierced with spears by local pagans who opposed his message. His martyrdom is one of the most dramatic examples of the transformation that can happen in a life when someone encounters the risen Christ. Thomas's death was violent, but it also reflected the depth of his faith and the boldness with which he proclaimed the gospel. His willingness to die for what he believed in demonstrates the power of the resurrection to change lives, even the most doubtful. 9. Saint James the Less, stoned to death. James the Less, the son of Alphaeus, was known for his deep wisdom and leadership in the early church. He was the first bishop of Jerusalem, and his leadership made him a target for Jewish authorities. James was stoned to death around 62 AD after being thrown from the pinnacle of the temple in Jerusalem. He did not die immediately from the fall, but was then beaten with a club until he finally passed away. James's martyrdom was a result of his role in the church, and his death reflects his commitment to leading the early Christian community. His final moments show his bravery and dedication to his faith, even when faced with violent opposition. 10th Saint Thaddeus, Jude, martyred by Axe Thaddeus, also called Jude, was a preacher of the gospel who traveled to Syria, Mesopotamia, and Persia. He was eventually martyred in Persia, where he was struck with an axe by his enemies. His death was not immediate, and he continued to proclaim the gospel even as he faced the axe that would end his life. Thaddeus's martyrdom is a reflection of his deep commitment to spreading the message of Christ, even in the face of violent persecution. His death calls us to evaluate our own willingness to suffer for the truth we hold dear. 11th, Saint Simon the Zealot, crucified Simon, who was once a zealot, part of a radical Jewish group fighting against Roman rule, became a faithful apostle of Christ. He is believed to have been crucified in Persia after spending years preaching the gospel. Some traditions suggest that he was crucified alongside another apostle, Jude, though the specifics of his death are unclear. What is certain is that he gave his life in service to Christ. Simon's crucifixion is a powerful reminder of the cost of discipleship. He abandoned his former life of violence and political rebellion to follow the peaceful and sacrificial path of Christ, ultimately paying the price with his life. 12th Saint Matthias, stoned and beheaded. Matthias was chosen by the apostles to replace Judas Iscariot. He preached in Judea and other regions, but his life was cut short by his enemies. According to tradition, Matthias was stoned to death and then beheaded. His martyrdom was a stark reminder that following Christ often comes at the cost of one's life. Matthias's death emphasizes the importance of standing firm in faith, no matter the consequences. As the final apostle to be chosen, his death highlights the high calling of all the apostles who were willing to give their lives for the spread of the gospel. 13. Saint Paul, beheaded in Rome. Saint Paul, formerly known as Saul, was one of the most influential figures in early Christianity. Initially a fierce persecutor of Christians, Paul's dramatic conversion on the road to Damascus transformed him into one of the greatest evangelists the world has ever known. He traveled extensively, establishing churches throughout the Roman Empire and writing many of the epistles in the New Testament, which continue to shape Christian theology today. Paul's death came around the year 64 to 67 AD, during the reign of Emperor Nero, amid the heavy persecution of Christians in Rome. Though the details of his death are not explicitly recorded in Scripture, Christian tradition holds that Paul was beheaded, a form of execution reserved for Roman citizens. His death likely occurred after he was arrested in Jerusalem and taken to Rome for trial. Paul's beheading, though swift, was a tragic end to a life devoted to spreading the message of Christ. His final years were spent in prison, yet even there, he continued to write letters that encouraged and instructed the early church. One of his final letters, 2 Timothy, was written during his imprisonment, in which he expressed his readiness to face death for the sake of the gospel. In 2 Timothy 4:6-8, Paul famously wrote, "For I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure is near. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing." Paul's martyrdom was a powerful witness to his unwavering commitment to Christ. He gave his life not only in service to the gospel, but also in defense of it. His final moments and his writings continue to inspire Christians today, reminding us of the cost of discipleship and the eternal hope that awaits those who remain faithful to Christ. 14. Judas Iscariot, the betrayer. Judas Iscariot was one of the 12 apostles chosen by Jesus, but he is most infamous for betraying Jesus to the religious authorities for 30 pieces of silver. His act of betrayal led to Jesus' arrest and crucifixion. After realizing the gravity of his actions, Judas was filled with remorse and tried to return the money, but the religious leaders rejected him. In despair, he hanged himself. The Gospel of Acts adds that Judas fell in a field, his body bursting open. His death serves as a tragic reminder of the consequences of betrayal and sin. The deaths of the apostles were brutal and often filled with great suffering, yet each of them chose to follow Jesus to the very end, even at the cost of their lives. Their deaths were not in vain, for their testimonies live on today in the hearts of believers around the world. As we reflect on their sacrifices, we are reminded of the cost of following Christ and the eternal reward that awaits those who remain faithful to the end.